Hello and welcome to the EP7 podcast channel. I am here with Kate Keisler, a special guest that I think I'm going to have on the show ongoing, from Calm and Connected, a therapy service for children and their families who are experiencing high levels of stress. And what Kate does and her company is they work out what's causing the stress and what kind of programs are going to help children and their families work through it, through like therapy sessions and therapy intensive camps. So hi Kate, how are you?
Good, thanks, George.
Were you looking forward to our podcast together?
Yeah, I'm forward to sort of delving in and seeing where our two minds meet on these sorts of topics, which is
Yeah,
exciting.
absolutely. And we already spoke about your future is to have your own podcast channel for Calm and Connected. That's going to be awesome.
Yeah, definitely like to sort of start looking into some of the big names in this area around sort of stress and around sort of understanding that neuroscience and actually what's happening with kids and families. And I think there's a lot of people who are doing amazing work in this area.
Well, Kate, I mean, the reason why we connected so quickly, we were at a Living and Well Expo and we were on the same author panel discussing, was it around children? No, it wasn't, was it? It wasn't just children, it was
Yeah, I think
a
it's
wide range of
parenting more so.
parenting. That's it,
Yeah.
parenting. And that was off the Cinderella Secrets book that I was talking about in that forum. And what you and I quickly connected on was the way you are helping these children is really honoring them and getting to the essence of their capability and helping them undo whatever's in their way. And for me, our common ground, or one of them, is neuroscience, because the entire EP7 program is built on neuroscience and epigenetics, like really appreciating the power of an individual to adapt their mindset and their entire biochemistry and physiology to be able to handle anything in their environment. And when you look at children struggling, often you can find where trauma has gotten in the way and now they're being triggered into high stress, and then suddenly learning difficulties and behavior that's incompatible suddenly becomes a big problem and an incredible stress for the parents as well, who are trying to do the best by their children. So can you give us an insight into your own personal understanding and the kind of work that's getting you great results for the children and their families?
Yeah, definitely. So what we're finding that once we start explaining to parents what stress is about and where it sort of comes from, and then how that actually makes children behave in certain ways, they understand the function of the behavior, and then they can actually do a lot of that problem solving and working it out for themselves. And I think explaining the science behind it and explaining how the brain works takes a lot of that judgment away. So it's actually not that you've got a naughty child or your child does this or your child does that. It's actually, well, this is how their brain works, this is what's happening, and this is what we need to do to put some strategies in place so they're supported so that they can then function and do what they need to do. So I think that just a lot of that education, that understanding actually goes a long way. And parents know their kids and they know themselves, and once they see it, they get it, and they're generally pretty good at putting things in place for themselves.
That's
So,
brilliant. Is that a huge relief for parents when they discover that there's so much depth to what's going on, and once you get into that, there's a freedom to be effective, and finally their love for their children, they feel like they're doing the best by their children?
yeah, and most parents are just trying to do the best they can. It's actually just they just don't understand how what they're doing is not working, and they just need to know a different way of working. So, and sometimes learning about their children then helps them to learn about themselves as well.
Ah,
So it sort
yes.
of works on both levels.
Yeah, yeah. Look, do you have beautiful stories where that's happened, where the pennies dropped and the parents started to go into self-reflection and changing themselves?
Yeah, definitely. We've had some parents who like they come to us because their kids maybe have huge sensitivities around hearing or touch and don't like lots of different sensation, and we start explaining that to them and they go, that's what I was like as a child and that's why I didn't like this and this. And I think as an adult we have so much more control over our environment, we have so much more control over the situations we can put ourselves in, so we can avoid a lot of the things we don't like. But some children, unfortunately, they have to go to school, they have to wear certain things, and they have to just join into what adults do, so they don't have the element of control, and so they tend to get the behaviours that comes with being forced into situations they don't like.
If you had your way, knowing what you know, how would you change an environment for a child, say at school and then at home? If you had your way, if you could just do this, don't do that, allow for this, like, because obviously when you see the same problems just constantly recurring, then you immediately see an environment that's not helping.
I think the best example of that would be like a kindy classroom, right? You walk into a kindy classroom and it's full of bright colours, things hanging everywhere, stuff all over the walls, and depending on sort of the teacher's preferences and how full on that might be. And there was a really interesting study that compared the comprehension levels of children. So a teacher read a whole group of children a book in a busy standard kindy class like this, and then they compared it to a teacher reading a book to the same age children in a classroom where there was nothing on the walls. It was completely blank, and the comprehension was about 5 times higher on the children with nothing around the walls, because they're not having to filter out all these distractions that are happening around them. They could just focus on what was going on from what the teacher was reading them. So,
that's remarkable, Kate.
Yeah. So, well, if you think about it, if you've got your desk,
it makes perfect sense.
If you're sitting in an office that's fully, like, got lots of clutter and lots of things around, your brain's actively having to work to filter out what's going on around you. And so you're actually using brain energy to filter out information rather than using all your brain energy to focus on what it needs to be doing.
Wow. So that is an easy thing to do, but it's not a quick process, because the awareness of that and for it to spread with credibility, it takes a while, doesn't it? Like, such a good idea seems to take longer than it should when so much is at stake.
And I think different people have different preferences as well. I mean, some teachers and adults and kids love having that many things around them, like that invigorates them. So, if teachers' classrooms are just a classic way of seeing what their preferences are, because one teacher has lots of things and another is very orderly, everything is colour-coded, and so you can see their preferences in that as well.
Yeah.
So,
Kate, I personally, with working with a lot of adults and groups, not many children, like teenagers, yes, but even then, not that many. But what's clear to me is that a lot of learning difficulties are linked to trauma. And it's not even a common thing for us to see someone who's on edge, easily triggered, easily distracted, kind of hyperactive, a bit manic, or withdrawn, It's often we're thinking, oh, what's wrong with the child? Do they have a learning difficulty? And then we're quick to put a label on the problem of this child, not realizing that maybe there's been a shock to their system where they were hurt, frightened severely through an event, and it's made them withdraw and it's made them act out. Do you think, is this what you do? Do you create an environment where you help that child tune into themselves? Because that seems to be so common.
Yeah, definitely. And it can be hard to isolate what actually was that situation, or it can be an accumulation of things. And some of the children we're finding is if there's actually been trauma during pregnancy, so while they've been in utero and during the birth, then that can also hold on and then actually impact them from the moment they've been born. So it's sometimes it's not that you can actually resolve the trauma, it's actually just what you can build on from that moment
Yeah,
afterwards.
yeah, exactly. Now, I wanted to bring up, you know how we were talking off air, the whole idea of this podcast was you were going to share a bit about Dancer Eagle.
Mm-hmm.
Can you share with us how you help parents understand emotions, how the brain works, so that they tune right in and start to see a lot more of what's going on?
Yeah, so Dan Siegel, we love his work. He's a psychiatrist and runs the Mind Institute. So he has done a lot of research in this area around mindfulness, especially, and written books like The Whole Brain Child and really easy books for parents to read that helps you to understand the neuroscience. And he just uses what's called the hand model of the brain, and he's got like a 2-minute YouTube video which explains it really well, which we often send out to parents and teachers. But essentially, it looks like you've got your brain stem, which is the back part of your brain here,
Mm,
your which he calls the survival brain.
mm,
So this is where a lot of your processing or your information comes up through here, then into your emotional brain, which is your limbic system, which is in the center of your brain. And then you've got your cortex, which is your thinking brain, which comes over the top. And the cortex is where a lot of your decision making, planning, and all those sorts of thinking based components start happening. So, what he talks about, which I think a lot of parents and kids relate to, is that when we're in this survival brain, so when we're in high stress, then what happens is our thinking brain gets switched off. So we call it flip the lid. So you flip the lid and you just start reacting emotionally to what's happening around you. So these are some of the kids that we see that things are just getting overwhelming. They're building up, and then that's it. They've lost the plot. They flip the lid and they're just angry. They're just hitting out, lashing out, or yelling or running away. And so they're just emotionally responding to what's going on. And I feel like I can relate to that too. Like when you're in that
yeah,
really
I know.
stressed situation,
You're
you
kidding
lose
me?
the
Do you know how
plot,
many
you lost
adults
the
come to EP7 for that problem?
Yeah, definitely. And I think what I like about it is that it sort of talks about both sides. Like first, you need to be able to be able to calm. Like you need to be able to de-stress, and that's sort of soothing this survival brain because you need to get out of that survival response. But
Mm,
also, it's about training this thinking brain into being able to manage those situations better, so that you don't flip the lid as quick as you might usually do. So it's sort of
yes.
looking at some of those body-based things and some of those thinking strategies.
You
Yeah.
know, Maslow's hierarchy of needs is quite interesting about, you can have higher thinking, but that higher thinking will immediately be irrelevant to your brain in the hierarchy of importance. So, in other words, you may be contemplating your origins of existence, looking at the stars, right? And then
Mm.
suddenly you get a mosquito bite you, and suddenly the stars are no longer relevant to you. You're not even thinking about them and the meaning of life. You're too busy trying to scratch your itch. And then you can get a sudden phone call, and it's uh, someone that you like tells you they don't want to see you anymore. Suddenly you're heartbroken, and now you don't even notice the itch potentially because the threat to you is great to lose someone you value, and suddenly that itch is insignificant. And then a tiger suddenly is on the scene, and now you can't even think of your friend, right?
Mm.
So, in other words, the brain has this hierarchy, and it can switch off realities in a blink of an eye if it deems what's important now is where all your attention should be. And so, if you don't feel safe, if you're triggered into insecurity, and you, so to speak, I like that flip the lid thing, then it becomes a journey into understanding why that's happening. Is that right? And so, do you start to look at the what's going on mentally for the child? Maybe how he feels emotionally helps you get there, and then maybe mapping out the circumstances around that child to see what the relationship is with their environment. Is that part of what
Mm.
you do?
Yeah, and I think like you said at the beginning, that when you're in this trauma and this stress can really change what happens within your epigenetics and within your body. So we're actually do some body-based tests to see this survival, to testing some of those things that are happening in your brainstem to actually see what level of stress you're actually in. When we've been in stress for quite a long period of time, then you go into that fight, flight, fright response. And some kids or adults even just operate in that fight, flight, fright response. Like that's their normal.
Wow.
So they're actually, the survival response is where they are all the time. So we're actually doing testing in the body to see what's actually, like how far into that response they are. And so how far we actually need to calm their survival system down before you can actually engage in some of those thinking strategies. So
very interesting.
Yeah, things like if your heart rate's really high, we've been putting heart rate monitors on kids and seeing, like, doing pre and post around once you start calming them down, does it actually bring down their overall heart rate across the day or across the week. And yeah, I think there's a lot of pretty cool ways of sort of showing to kids.
Kate, do you do that at the camp? Do you monitor their heart rates and record them throughout the day, every day kind of thing?
Yeah, so some kids, I think, we found respond really well to, like, the charts and the numbers, like, and it's kind of like a good way for them to get that feedback for themselves.
Yeah, that's clever.
So, like, even just things like Fitbits and something accessible like that, we might put a Fitbit on a child and go, oh, what number's your heart rate up now? Oh, it's over 120. We better bring that down. So, like, what's going to help you to get down and sort of bring it down to 70, or how low can we get it? So, and that's when they might do 5 deep breaths and go, well, that didn't work. What can we do next? And sort of testing out, and they get that real immediate feedback, I guess.
But Kate, you know, the way you were sharing that, there was a lightness, a non-judgmental, playful way of engaging the child. And obviously you wouldn't be doing great work if it wasn't for you creating that environment for children so that they feel safe and secure. Because what a critical first step it is for a child to start to feel safe and slow down their heart rate, you know? So yeah, like keeping it playful, non-judgmental, like it's some strict thing we have to achieve. Hurry up, child. Reduce your stress. It's like, judgment.
I once did this program with a child. Oh, it's the funniest thing. Every day I went to his house for 5 days. And the first day it took him over an hour to get just to a calm state. This is 7 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
And, and each day it got less and less. And on the last day on the way to the appointment, I witnessed a car accident and had to get out and help and give some first aid. And so I rocked up to this appointment in like I was going into a bit of a shock. And he's like, Kate, I know exactly what to do. He stepped me through and gave me all, he's like, let's test your heart rate, Kate. No, we still need to keep going. So he actually ended up coaching me. And
that's awesome.
I think these kids can learn, I think he was only 8. So he just, his ability to understand and learn, because we just did it all play-based, like just having a lot of fun.
But you created a little calm in the chaos leader.
Yeah.
The moment there's a crisis, he just clicks into process.
It's like, I know what to do. So, yeah.
Wow. So what are some of the things that you see happen that makes it all worthwhile for you, for these children?
I think my favourite parts are the camps where the first couple of days is about getting their stress level down and getting them feeling good and feeling comfortable within their bodies and feeling like they can be who they want to be, and in that really comfortable situation where there is no judgment and everyone's there to learn the same things. And then by the end of camp, they're making friends and they're able to start interacting and achieving some of those goals, which you can't do unless you focus on the stress component of it first. So it's just nice seeing those moments where they've tried something new or they've made a friend, and yeah, I think they're the best.
So yeah, the friendships are actually quite special because it's hard to make a friend when you don't feel safe and secure. You're too closed off and you're too second guessing your environment. You're too preoccupied with protecting yourself. So for you to hold that space long enough so that the body, I feel that the body goes to its natural state, which is to connect. which is to engage and share and have fun and go on an adventure, and relationships are the glue to all that. So it's funny how if you just hold a space for children long enough, they default to their innate gift of connecting and opening and being who they really want to be.
Yeah, definitely. And I think we hear that a lot with kids with autism, that a lot of people say that kids with autism don't have social skills. But I actually think it's just that they're so stressed out of managing all these other things that are going for them. They don't have space for social skills. They're too busy worrying about what's going on for themselves or what's happening in their environment. And it's funny, once you calm these kids down and give them some of those regulation-based skills, then connection does happen. And I think autism is a very pure way of seeing that sometimes with kids, rather than other children that perhaps it's a bit more complex because there's more different things going on. So,
Okay. I have coached one-on-one quite a few autistic clients. And in our space, I don't actually see the autism. Like, it may be there a little bit at the beginning, but I'm so used to diversity of people anyway, I don't really get caught up in it. But what I find is that the connection becomes so strong, the banter, the joking, the exploring of ideas of how to be different, how to see the world differently, the wonder, how they open up, and I'm thinking, this person is incredibly charming and normal, and I feel I feel it's such a valuable experience to be in their presence as a human being for who they are. And then it makes me wonder how it goes all so bad out there, you know, like, so it makes sense that I think that we all need to catch up and become a lot more aware as to how we are misunderstanding and how we are contributing to an environment that triggers very sensitive people, children and people, yeah? That we're triggering them into overprotection that then exacerbates that whole process of connecting and being informed of your environment. Because if you're being overwhelmed because it's all too much, then you must shut down. That's a normal thing for all of us. We have to protect ourselves to a degree. And when I see someone who's very sensitive, I immediately think that they haven't lost that part of them, which adults learn to dull. So in other words, there's this whole premise that you toughen up your child because the world is ugly. But in the toughening up process, you're inadvertently abusing them to get them used to abuse so that they become more resilient. They learn to push back or not feel it. But I'm sorry, but your subconscious is having to reconcile an interesting world they're in where that's normalized, And for me, I'm a great advocate for the artist in everyone and the high sensitivity that is a part of being an artist. Because if you've come into this world to feel life, then what are we doing dulling your senses? It's like turning your precious instrument that allows you to feel the depth of life. You're dulling your precious instrument. And it doesn't make sense. But I get why we do it, because if you're insecure, if you're not feeling safe, then that becomes a coping mechanism. We're medicating children and adults. They're self-medicating as we get older. Suddenly we're drinking and we're doing things to protect ourselves so we don't feel the pain of a setback, a failure, a rejection. And I honestly believe our journey for each other is to get to a point where we build our inner security and our self-worth to the point where we no longer so quickly misinterpret our environment and then fall into stress. And I wonder what would happen to the so-called autistic contingent of the population if we created an environment where it no longer alienated them, made them feel like there's something wrong with them, and suddenly we just slowed down and tuned into them and just communicated with them in a way where we honored their sensitivity. And therefore, they felt like there was a connection now. They're with people that are with them, not against them, because they're being seen as someone with a problem. I wonder how much that would change that reality.
Yeah, definitely. And just having those environments where they are able to sort of thrive and really just connect in with themselves and with others, I think is definitely a key to a lot of these kids. And we quite often have parents where they say to us, "Oh, we don't want them to do this behaviour and this behaviour and this behaviour so they can fit in." And sometimes it's a bit of a tricky situation where a lot of times on camps we just let some of the behaviours happen because you want to be creating a situation where the kid can feel like they can just do whatever they need to feel good for themselves, and then we're sort of redirecting, putting things in place so they feel supported, and then the behaviours tend to just go away. So
see, that's the point, isn't it?
yeah. So
it's like the behaviour is the smoke, and people go, "Could you make the smoke go away?" I go, "Well, it's because of a fire, and if we handle the gas leak, there won't be a fire, and there won't be any smoke. So how about we change the environment where the gas leak is stopped, and then you'll notice that the fire doesn't create the smoke." And everyone wants, no, just make the smoke go away. But there's a fire because of the gas leak. Can't we get to the root cause here? So
yeah, exactly.
So what I like about, your camps can go 4 days and longer?
Some are 2 days, some are 3 or 4 days. So
it only takes that long for you to immediately start to see these children calm down, enjoy the space, and then start to open up and connect.
Depending on the child, so some kids it might take them, like we had one boy with significant trauma in his history, and it was the third camp that we saw a complete shift in the way he was. But a lot of kids it might just take, after a couple of days they were able to sort of connect in with them, and just that environment is enough for them, or the people in their group might be what needs to shift them. So it just really depends on where the child's at. And I think it's not just about the camp as well. It's sort of, we do workshops with the parents on camp when they pick up their kids so that they can then integrate those strategies back into day-to-day life. Because
that's great.
You might see a shift with a child on camp, but then if they're going back into the same situation and it's not reinforced, then that doesn't hold as well. So.
Oh, totally. I see a lot of change management principles in that,
yes.
Which is great because it's kind of like, well, your child improved on this camp for reasons. So let's give you the reasons, and let's give you tips that make it relevant in your home, so that it's like passing the baton to a relay race.
Yeah, but it's hard sometimes for parents who themselves are in such a stress response that they can't take on that information to perhaps see the changes in their child. So we might have a child that comes on a camp, what we see from day 1 to day 3 is amazing, but they can't see it when they pick their kid up because of where the parent is at. And sometimes it's about actually supporting the parent.
So really it may be worthwhile to give some correspondence to the parent before they arrive. We want you to relax before you arrive because we want you to really tune in to the subtleties of how the energy of your child has shifted. And often when we're stressed and been running around and then we finally get to the camp to pick up the child in a hurry, we're not in ourselves in a space to notice. So make sure you take lots of deep breaths and get the calm and connected yourself so that by the time you've arrived, I reckon that would be really handy because you don't want them to gloss over the beauty that has been achieved and to be built on. And I wonder also whether there's a great opportunity for parents then to know what impact their own stress has on the mood of the child and the behavior of the child. Because often we think that our children are only picking up on what we say to them, or, you know, but really it's how we feel that children can pick up very easily what your mood is. And do you ever go into that with parents?
It depends on our opportunity to have that relationship with a parent. So some parents we might get to work over a long period of time, or the kids come on multiple camps so we can build up that relationship to sort of have that sort of discussion. And other parents, they might drop their child off on day one, pick them up, and that's all we hear and see of them. So depending on that opportunity to, I suppose, build up that relationship, because that's a pretty hard conversation to have with somebody, for them to be able, you know, because they've come to you to help their child, and now you're saying, "Hey, let's talk about you." So you gotta work on that slowly.
Well, do you know what we could do, Kate? Given that I work with so many adults, maybe we can dedicate a few podcasts and theme them based on the mindfulness for parenting, around learning difficulties for children, and how to create the space. Maybe we should do that, because then that might be a nice thing to refer to parents to make your job easier. You spend all that time helping the child start to shift. It'd be great if they could, while they're driving, get some insights into how they could help the child at home as well.
Yeah, that sounds great.
Cool. So look, we'll wrap up, and we'll obviously tell the listener, stay tuned for more in the future. Cool.
Sounds great. Thank you, George.
Right. Bye for now.